Well, I think we'll get started. Don't want to go over the time too much, so if you'll just find a seat, come up front. There's a table nice right here, right front and center. Don't be shy. Before I start with my presentation proper, I want to say a few words about our sort of theme for the year, which is transforming together, and how that connects with the worship challenge and some other things you may have heard about. Our presiding bishop, Michael Curry, is an amazing man. If you've ever gotten to hear him talk or speak or see a YouTube video of him, it's just he's charismatic and engaging and really communicates well. So I encourage you to go home and look him up and watch him speak. But one of the things that he says over and over again is that we really, as long as we engage in this sort of Christian tribalism of saying we are Methodists or we are Presbyterians or we are Episcopalian, we won't go anywhere or do anything. And he is proposing what he calls the Jesus movement, and that we are the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. And I really like that, and I think it ties into our idea of the worship challenge, just sort of saying it's our job to be countercultural. It's our job to go against norms of Sundays being completely overscheduled for almost every demographic in every possible way and not being a Sabbath. And so I hope if you're participating in the worship challenge, thank you. If not, I hope you'll pray for the people that are, because it is an important thing for us to do, I think, to try and transform our culture by being countercultural and by being the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. So what I want to do today is tell you a little bit about my story. And I think we always understand things better when they're put in context. Tell you a bit about my musical journey and the people who have had an influence on my life and the circumstances that have had an influence on my life, my musical career, my ministry, as a way into thinking of where we might be headed here with music. So I start with my story. That's me and my grandfather in Americus, Georgia, actually in Plains, Georgia, outside of Americus, where Jimmy Carter's from. And we grew up in a very rural area. On my grandfather's farm. I think we're looking at the hogs there. He had a big pig pen. And pretty, very rural. My parents, when they were young and dating and got married, they got sucked into this crazy evangelical sort of it was almost a cult, really. And it was called Americus Baptist Temple. In Americus, Georgia. And it was a small church with lots of gospel singing. And I remember around age 5 or 6, the piano player, Mrs. Weldon, I remember making a connection that I couldn't read music and didn't know what it was, but you're standing there with the songbook and you're looking at the notes. I remember making a connection between the fact that there was a difference between what was printed on the page and what she was playing, because she was elaborating and doing it in that gospel style and running all up and down the keyboard. And I remember thinking, how does she know how to do that? I want to know how to do that. And my mom says that I would draw. We didn't have a piano or a keyboard or anything, that I would draw pictures of a piano and put it on the table and, just sit all day and just kind of play my fake piano. I also have a memory, and this is really strange if you believe in Jungian sort of archetypes and metaphysical influences. So we grew up in this very evangelical, very gospel church. I had never seen anything remotely approaching ritual or liturgy or robes or vestments or an altar, anything that you might call Catholic. Never saw it. But my mom says that she looked out the window one day, and we had one of these great big propane tanks in the yard. And she said that I had dragged a big volume of the encyclopedia out and was standing behind the propane tank with the book open, basically saying Mass. And I don't know where I got that from. But the other story like that is, again, never having seen the idea of an organ, a pipe organ, an organ, anything. My dad remembers watching TV one night, and I was sitting beside him on my little stool, the recliner, sort of armchair, and he looked over, and I had put a pillowcase over my head, almost like a nun's habit, and was playing the side of the armchair like an organ. And all those stories, I guess, the point is I'm doing what I was destined to be doing. And every point, every twist, turn, what we see as chance decisions, that some of them were not even made for me when my parents decided to move, to a different town. Every one of those decisions put me further along that path, and I'm very grateful for it. And it informs why I believe so strongly in working with children and choristers, because I was there, and maybe one of them will be one of the next church musicians. So when I was about 8, my father got a different job, and we moved to Opelika, Alabama. Now, I'm sure many of you know exactly where Opelika is and can place it on a map. It's right next to Auburn University. You may have heard of Auburn, big football rivalry between Auburn and Alabama. But we actually lived in the tiny community of Beauregard, which was unincorporated and had one red light. Everything else was, catch as catch can. And we visited a few churches the first few weeks we were there. Sort of went church shopping like you do when you move to a new congregation, and they were all nice places. And then someone invited us to go. Did you catch that? Someone invited us to go to Providence Baptist Church. Providence was a pretty large rural Baptist church. It's not like what we say First Baptist downtown with the columns and the pillars. It was a rural church, but it was fairly large. I would say the average Sunday attendance was probably around 150, and there were 80 people in the choir and 45 strong in the youth group, and every single person in the youth group sang in the youth choir and sat together up in the front of the church. It was. I think Emily Given has talked before about the sort of golden age of youth ministry in the 80s and 90s, and we had similar experiences with that. But the thing that was so providential, if you'll pardon the pun, about this move, I'll show you. This is the inside. It's been reconfigured because they built a new building across the street with projector screens and stadium seating and all that nonsense. But this is the old church. I think they're using it now for a sort of auditorium, but it gives you an idea of the layout. And where the drum set was a nice grand piano, and across the way was an electronic organ. And in the Baptist tradition, the piano and the organ play together at the same time, for every hymn. And I just was completely enthralled by that. But the reason this was providential is because the music minister at that church was also the director of choirs at Auburn University. And here's a man who had his doctorate in music and a master's in composition, had studied with all the great composers at the great universities. And because he'd gotten this job, in rural Alabama, he was also the minister of music. He's still the minister of music. Last year, he celebrated his 55th year as minister of music there. And they had children's choir every Sunday night, and so I got shipped off to that. And his wife, that's him, and his wife, Gail, she was the children's choir director. And I remember sitting on the back row, and we started singing the first piece, and I was singing with reckless abandon, and these mean girls on the front row, one of whom was her daughter, turned around and gave me such the stink eye, and just like, what is that noise? And I was oblivious, but I was not singing in tune. I couldn't carry a tune. I couldn't match pitch. I didn't know that, but there you have it. So Miss Gail, as we called her, called my mom the next week. And this is that turning point where so often these stories say, why don't you just not bring Michael the next week, But that's not what she said. She said, bring Michael 30 minutes early next week. And we did. And for the next couple of months, she worked with me, taught me how to match pitch, taught me how to read music, and that was really the beginning of it all, because she took an interest, and faced with a challenging situation, this kid who was terrible decided to do something about it rather than trying to sort of hide the problem or only work with the kids who could do it. That was extremely formative in my life, and I recognized it then, and I recognize it more now. She was my first piano teacher. Didn't charge us for lessons because we didn't have any money. And then when I was 13 years old, our church organist left. She moved, got a job, and there was nobody else. And I had begun to play by ear, like hear a hymn and pick it out. And, I wasn't amazing, but I could get through a hymn. And Dr. Tom, the minister of music, said, "You're on next Sunday on the organ." It was an electronic organ, but it was still an organ, multiple keyboards and the pedals. And so I said, all right. And I remember going into the first service, and he in the hallway, he said, "Do you have your registrations all set?" And I said, "My what?" But I figured out, this is what you do with your feet, and this is what you do with your hands, and you sort of, and make it work. But that was an amazing opportunity at age 13 to be made the church organist. It was my first job. I was paid, are you ready for it? $75 a month. And that allowed me to sort of, have fun as a teenager. But being in the youth choir under him, watching him, learning from him, and then as I got older, junior and senior year in high school, he started letting me take a leadership role and direct the youth choir when he wasn't there. And the most important thing that happened, though, was he and his wife arranged for me to study piano lessons at Auburn University with the piano professor there. So I didn't know how to read music, and she took this sort of being able to play by ear and enthusiasm and overlaid the discipline of music reading and the discipline of practice onto it. And all this time, let's see, here's a nice, if there were anybody who was ever an awkward teenager or any awkward teenagers in the room, this next picture shows you, never fear. It all sort of works itself out. This is really super awkward. And the shirt says Providence Puppeteers. We had a puppet team, and I was on the puppet team. We'd go around and do different puppet shows. But I was in the marching band, and so it came time to go to college. And I should mention that I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school, let alone go on to college. It wasn't, anything to be pitied or, it's just part of the culture. So Samford University is a private college in Birmingham. It's a Baptist school. And Dr. Tom had gone there, and Miss Gail, and that's where they met. And so I knew about it and thought, it's good enough for him, So I applied and was accepted into Samford. Oh, there's one more picture, a little high school drum major of the marching band. So I applied to Samford and went to become a band director. That was going to be my career, because that was about the extent of my musical exposure in Alabama. Football is king, and so you've got to have a good marching band, and we didn't even have a choir in our school. The choir I got at church, but I thought, I can be a band director and make a living that way. But it was also the first time, there's Samford's campus. It was sort of Georgian, neo, everything that stands still is Georgian. The press box is Georgian, there's everything. These fake arches and chimneys everywhere. But it's a beautiful campus, and I saw my first pipe organ there. This is Reed Chapel, which is the older chapel on campus. And the organ professor, here's the other chapel. It's not very Baptist, but there you have it. And I was just overcome by these spaces and these pipe organs, but all the while I was a percussionist. I majored in percussion and drums and thought I'd be a band director. But the organ professor there, a man named Ted Tibbs, had heard that I had played the organ. I think Dr. Tom had probably tipped him off. And he said, you're coming early for band camp, right? This is before my freshman year. He called the house. I said, yes. He said, well, why don't he talk like this, and always very deep voice, and rubbed his hands together. So, why don't you come a little over to me at your lunch break and have an organ lesson every day? So during band camp, we'd march around and play things and sweat all morning, and then I would go on my lunch break and have an organ lesson with him. And he started me at the very beginning of the method book. And over those 2 weeks of having a lesson every day, we got through the beginner method book. And the first week of school, he basically grabbed me by my ear and dragged me to the dean's office and made me change my major to organ. And he sort of believed in me and thought it could be done. And so, like Miss Gale, who sort of saw a problem and took an interest and worked to fix the problem, Tibbs saw potential and really pushed me. I mean, there were lessons where I would run out of the chapel and in tears because he was really demanding. And I remember once going to I ran in the men's bathroom. Tears, I can't believe. And I heard him come after me, and I sort of put my feet up in the stalls. He would see I was in there, But he was a wonderful man and organist for 40 years at Southside Baptist Church in Birmingham. And these themes of sort of people who are fabulous musicians, I mean, just cream of the crop, dedicating their lives not to being recitalists or being great, but service and ministry. It was very, very formative for me. Also at Samford, I met my best friend, Jarrell Horton, and that's him with his family. We had a little reunion 2 years ago in Birmingham. Jarrell was a tuba major. He looks like a tuba major. And we were roommates, and we hit it off from day one and just became best friends. And Jarrell is the person who taught me how to play black gospel music, because he was also the organist at his missionary Baptist church. And during the summer, sometimes we would swap off, and he would come and play at the Episcopal church I was playing at, and I'd go and play at his church. But just a really wonderful guy. And first time I sort of met someone who had the same passion that I did, and to be in that company. Also at Samford, there was the a cappella choir, which was world famous in Alabama. But they did have a very good reputation. And the choir had been founded by this fellow named Gene Black. And my first 2 years at Samford were his last 2 years. He was known as DB, or Dr. Black, and he ran an absolutely tight ship. But being in that choir and being exposed to that level of music, as opposed to the kind of good old Baptist music that I had growing up, was also a game changer. We sang Bach. We sang, actually, the two pieces the choir sang this morning, the spiritual Ain't of That Good News and The Eyes of All. I first encountered those in the Samford a cappella choir. And just being surrounded by people who had excellence as their driving force was really, really formative. My junior year at Samford, I had been playing, Sunday jobs at Baptist churches and Methodist churches. But then an Episcopal church came open, and it was a part-time job, and it was a tiny little Episcopal church in Birmingham called St. Andrew's. And St. Andrew's was an Anglo-Catholic parish, but they didn't really know what that meant in a good way. It was high church, but it was the most down-to-earth place you can imagine, and it was what I call street Anglo-Catholic. They really believed in serving the poor. They ran a community kitchen. On any given Sunday, you would have a banker sitting next to a homeless person, and neither of them would even, bat an eye. And all kinds. It was downtown, and all kinds of crazy things would happen. I remember playing one Sunday, and the organ was sort of up at the front of the church. The console was, and the choir sat across at the front, sort of facing. And this guy comes in, homeless guy comes off the street, and the bread and wine were in the back of the church, ready to be bought. He walks right over to the chalice, drinks it dry, looks at the altar and goes, and stumbles back out the door. But that sort of thing was par for the course at St. Andrews. And the thing I learned most there is never a dull moment in church, and you always roll with the punches. It's where I got my rule number 1, which is never panic. And so here's this Anglo-Catholic, high church, Episcopal church. I didn't know anything about liturgy, anything about Anglican church music. I was this 19-year-old Baptist kid, and they took a chance and decided, he can play the organ, we can teach him about liturgy. And they did, and it's really where I learned to love liturgy, where I learned to love the prayer book, where I learned about sort of having an ethos, a guiding aesthetic that's particular to a place, but helps you sort of choose music. And it's not where I learned, it's not about what I want or what I want to do. It's about the ethos of the place. Very special place. After, in fact, I stayed in Birmingham 1 year after I graduated because I was having such a good time at St. Andrews. So I stuck around and played there for another year and worked with the Birmingham Boys Choir as an assistant conductor. Tibbs really pushed me to go to grad school. And one day I was walking in the chapel was in the religion building. It sort of jutted out on one side of it. And I saw this bulletin board, and in big letters it said, Institute of Sacred Music. And I thought, well, that sounds exactly like what I want to do. And that's all I saw, Institute of Sacred Music. So I pulled off the card. Back then, you actually pulled off a physical card, and filled it out and put it in the mail with a stamp. And I got this information packet, and so I applied. I think I didn't realize until the packet came that it was the Yale Institute of Sacred Music. I just saw Institute of Sacred Music and thought, that's exactly, what I want to do. So Tibbs prepared me for the audition, took me to visit, paid for the flight, went with me, and I got in. And that was an amazing 4 years. The master's program is 2 years, and the ISM offers only 2 degrees in music, organ and choral conducting. And it's a very small institute, very well endowed. It's second only to the Yale Law School in terms of endowment. And so if you get in, you go for free. And they throw great parties all the time, too. And that was another good perk. But I came in as an organ major, and that was where I sort of, after my first lesson, my organ teacher, who's now the director of the institute, said, how many hours a day do you practice? And I said, hours? Because at Samford, I really did coast. And, I heard today in the sermon talking about wasted time. I was pretty lazy, and I could get by with it and sort of sight read in the lesson and, I was playing repertoire that was at the level that I could sort of fake it. And those days were over. And he read me the riot act, and that 3 hours a day was the minimum that I should be practicing. That he really made the point that all these people had invested in me, and that I was not here on my own volition. There were all these people propping me up and wanting me to succeed. And so I had a responsibility then to work hard. And I hadn't thought about that before. It was a real lesson. So great music at Yale, obviously, great instruction, being surrounded by great minds. It was really heady 4 years. I stayed and did a second master's in conducting because it was free. Why not? But the thing that most was formative was a building, and it's Marquand Chapel, which is the chapel at the Divinity School. Now, this is a historic photo of Marquand. It looks very Protestant, right? Not a lot of iconography, just very spare New England sort of. And the pews and, altars. While I was there, Yale, the Divinity School, embarked on a restoration of that end of the quadrangle and shut it down for a year and completely remodeled it. And the result was this. It's an amazing, multi-purpose, versatile space. They even put it, because the historic 1928 beautiful pipe organ in the front wasn't enough. They restored that and built a gigantic Baroque pipe organ in the back in the balconies. There's two huge pipe organs, a Hammond organ for gospel, and they treated it, there was daily chapel for the Divinity School, and they treated it like a laboratory. And so that seminarians could sort of try out ideas. And I was the musician in Marquand. And some days it would be just heaven on earth. Somebody would come up with this creative thing and we'd do it and it would be amazing. And some days it was an absolute flaming disaster. You know, some seminarians with ideas is one of the worst things in the world. And things would just fall apart, and nobody bothered, because we knew that because it had fallen apart in chapel, they would never go and inflict it on some poor parish someday. So it was treated as a laboratory where you had the freedom to fail. It was really fun, and what that time did, here's another picture of worship there in the round. That time gave me permission to think outside of the box. Because my first experience was in an Anglo-Catholic parish. Here I come now thinking I know everything about liturgy and when to bow and what words you should use here, and I just knew it all. And being the musician in Marquand Chapel challenged all that and let me think about using jazz in worship and using expansive language to talk about God that didn't limit God. And valued tradition, centered on tradition, but expanding the fringes. And if you think about it, I think that's what God actually does. God is always on the margins. God is always with the people who are on the margins and siding with them and challenging us to expand our center. And so being at Marquand was really a great chance to do that. So I had run through all the available degrees that I could get for free, and thought that I might actually have to get a job, so I sort of started casting about. And we had learned, we took a class called History of the Organ, a whole year-long class just on the, it's amazing, starting back with the hand-cranked, hand-pumped stuff in Roman times and going all the way through. But we learned about an organ that was built in 1935 and really was a game changer for the American organ scene. What was so special about this organ was that it was huge and did not subscribe. At the time, there were two ideas about how to build a good organ. One idea was that it should be built along historical lines and model organs from the 17th century in Germany. And another school of thought was that organs should be slushy and symphonic. Think Wanamaker's organ, right? Lots of effects and sounds and beautiful orchestral imitative sounds. And these camps were bitterly divided. But this particular organ managed to meld the two in a synthesis and became a model for how organ building, it changed organ building in the country. Moving forward. It's a prototype of an organ called the American Classic Organ. Well, this organ was at a sleepy little New England boarding school called Groton School, and I thought, well, the job was open. I thought I would love to play that organ every day. Can you imagine? They have daily chapel and get to play this amazing instrument that I've learned about and read about. And so I got the job and discovered while there, here's a picture of the chapel. It really is one of the most stunning ecclesiastical buildings in the country. Henry Vaughan is the architect. Incidentally, the red curtain is there because the architect had originally designed a beautiful wooden carved reredos with figures and statues and to sort of match the organ case. And the founding headmaster, Mr. Peabody, decided that it was too popish and didn't want it. So he had the curtain put in. But I discovered here, I wanted the job for the organ, but I discovered that I really loved teaching and had all sorts of great teaching mentors, because I had never had a music education class. People, you can major in music education or performance. And I had majored in performance, didn't know anything about assessments or testing or, how to give out information. I'd just been sort of winging it. And that was the time where I really learned the craft of education. And there's my first class of seniors. They hated my guts. They're all smiling here because it's the end of the year. And they'd gotten to know me. But I came in, I followed a guy who had been there for 25 years and retired and was much beloved. And I came in with all these new rules. And, this one girl she burst into tears because my predecessor's tradition was that seniors sat on the front row of the choir stall, regardless of voice part. And I said, well, that won't do. Sopranos have to sit with the sopranos, and basses have to sit with the basses. And she burst into tears, and she said, "You're ruining my senior year." And she came back to her reunion 5 years later and apologized, which was a nice feeling. But the ability to, I think that Groton was also where I realized that teenagers and children are capable of excellence, and you don't have to dumb it down for them. A lot of children's or youth choirs sing sort of cute little ditties, and they parade up and sing about, night rhymes with light and sort of wispy ideas about God. But teenagers and children can sing Mozart and Palestrina and Bach and atonal stuff, and they want to be challenged. And I think this is really where I realized that having a youth choir didn't mean having a kiddie choir, that they could do real repertoire. So that's sort of how I got here. I moved to Philly to work for Shipley because I decided I wanted a day school job, tired of being a dorm head and all that stuff. And really sort of refined the sort of teaching skills, but now here I am here. And what does this mean for us going forward? I think the idea is that we are not our own. First of all, God gave us life and set us on this trajectory, but there are people who are part of our story who have influenced us. I know every person in this room can think about someone who helped you in your career. And I'm pretty sure everyone in this room can think about the person who first told you about Jesus. Maybe it was a Sunday school teacher or a relative. But someone did that and took that interest. And it's really why I believe in our music ministry here, we can focus our energies on a children's chorister program that demands excellence from kids because they'll give it. I had a kid today show up. The choristers aren't scheduled to sing until next week, and one of them just showed up in the choir room today, wanted to sing, so we put a cassock on him, and go for it. They want to do that stuff. It doesn't diminish any of the work that our adult choir does. We have an excellent adult choir, one of the best choirs I've ever worked with, and it really is a privilege and a thrill to work with them every week. But when we bring them up alongside of each other, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And we've got people who have gone through the chorister program who are singing in the adult choir now. One of them brought a friend Thursday night to rehearsal, said, "Hey, can I join?" I said, "Absolutely, here's a hymnal." What we're essentially doing is training up the next generation of people who will be the church, right? Because you always have to be replenishing. And I learned this about recruiting for children's choir. You always have to be recruiting. You never stop. There's no downtime. You're recruiting in October. You're recruiting in February. You're recruiting in March. Always recruiting. And the church has not done such a good job of that as the church, capital T, capital C, right? We're sort of content to have it be for us what we need it to be. And I think we really have to think seriously about how we engage children and youth, and not just hook them and get them in with some gimmick, right? But to form them and say, come and be a part of us, change, transform into the body of Christ and morph into that. And I think there's nothing like a chorister program for doing that. It's evangelism, it's formation, it's training. It just works. So this is from Vacation Bible School this summer. We had a little after VBS music enrichment, and I advertised it and said, "Oh, we'll give you free lunch." I thought maybe 10 kids would sign up. 32 kids signed up. And this is just the older group. There were so many I had to split them in half and hire someone to help me do the younger group. But of these are 18 kids, and of these 18, 3 who are not parishioners have joined the chorister program. That's a pretty good yield. And just putting the opportunity out there is really, I think, going to yield dividends. My friend Richard Webster is the music director at Trinity Copley Square in Boston. Little church, you might have heard of it. Richard was brought to Copley Square to start a chorister program. And 15 years ago, this is what he had. A bunch of ragtag kids, because they were starting it from scratch. And in fact, after the first year, he lost about half of them because he doubled the rehearsals and said, if we're really going to do this, let's do it right and be excellent. And that was okay with him. People would say, oh, can we come every third Thursday? Because he said, maybe I don't think you're ready to make this commitment right now, and that's okay. Because what happened was the kids who were into it and the families who were into it drew more like themselves. So 15 years ago, this is where they were. 2 years ago, that's the choristers and adults of Trinity at St. Paul's, London, singing for a week on a choir tour. The first 3 rows are all choristers, children. I believe we can do that. I believe we can get there. But it's not going to happen on wishful thinking or just like nice ideas in the sky. And it's not even going to happen with weekly, great rehearsals and kids. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take some infrastructure. And I would love for you to be prayerful about what that means for us if we're going to make this a priority as a church. And how do we move forward from there? So just in closing, these are a few guiding principles that I want to base my ministry here around. One is that music is evangelism and formation. It's not just a nice concert series, right? Music does these things for people. And so church music is a means to an end, to tell people about Jesus and to form them in the Christian faith and in the Anglican tradition. Excellence in musicianship. I think no one wants to be a part of something mediocre. I'm sure we've all been part of mediocre things in the past, right? So the music tradition here is excellent. It has been excellent and will continue to be excellent. And that is not antithetical to membership and participation. Excellence is not antithetical to participation. The Anglican musical heritage, the prayer book, the liturgy, the hymnal, these are all things that are important to me. And while we will expand those margins, we did it this morning with the gospel song at communion, and then saying "Come Labor On" for the last hymn, right? It's a little bit of both. I think it's important to form kids in what it means to be an Episcopalian in our tradition. And then finally, character, leadership, and teamwork. These are these sort of 21st century soft skills you hear a lot about that don't really get taught in a traditional sort of educational format. But nothing will teach leadership than saying to a kid, "You're head chorister, figure it out. Go take these over there and get them robed up," right? And they do it and they figure it out. So this is just sort of an overview of where I've been and what I look forward to here. And I would love to take any questions if you have them. Yes. Boy, that's a great plant. I owe you $25 for that. So First Steps, which is now called Family Table, the 9:15 worship service that happens over here in the new chapel. That is actually the best thing we have going for a chorister program, and it's related to the nursery school. So basically, Liz and I are leading nursery school chapel every Monday and every other Thursday for the really small kids. But we're down there. They see our faces. I'm singing with them. They get to know us. And then the music at Family Table is tied to the nursery school curriculum that we're going to be using. So when nursery school families visit Family Table, they know the songs. And then Noelle, who's in the back of the room. Hi, Noelle. Noelle is going to be working with me as the children's music assistant, and she sings soprano in the choir as well. But she's a senior. Are you a senior? Senior music education major at Westminster Choir College. And she's teaching our youngest choir, which is the Joyful Noise Choir for 4 to 8-year-olds that meet after Family Table. So while the kids are here, we grab them on Sundays. And she's doing a fantastic job with that. And so they will grow up, right, and become choristers. And so keeping that long view is really important. Yes? I know this sounds like a cop-out, but I do not. I do not. I get excited by music that is engaging. I get excited by music that fits right into the slot it needs to fit into and that complements, other things that might be going on. So people ask me, what's the best organ you've ever played? What's your favorite organ to play? And my answer is always the one I'm sitting in front of. You just have to make it work. I don't know that I can necessarily, but one can. And the short answer is there's no such... Oh, sorry. The question is, how much of a success with the chorister program is based on a child's innate talent, and how much can be taught and trained? And there's no such thing as someone who is tone deaf. There absolutely is not. And if you think you are, I'm here to tell you you're wrong. There is no such thing as being not able to carry tune. You just haven't learned how to yet. The very fact that you speak a language with your mouth that has inflections and rising and falling pitches means that you are not tone deaf. And so any kid who shows up, just like I was, in the second grade, can be taught to sing and to read music. It helps to have, if you've got 12 kids and you got 3 or 4 who are really talented, that's super helpful. And they, leaders and sort of carry the others along. How is our organ? Well, that's a loaded question. It's a very good organ, and it was built in that Baroque movement in the 1960s, trying to recapture these sort of 17th, 18th century North German instruments like Bach would have played. It was installed in 1962, and I know that, in the early 2000s, there were some mechanical issues and the whole thing was taken out and cleaned and this, that, and the other thing. But organs are fragile sort of ecosystems of mechanical moving parts, and they have a certain lifespan. So within the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to be having to look at, the extensive mechanical rehaul of an instrument like that is the normal sort of wear and tear, and making a decision over whether is that how we want to spend that money, or is it time to start thinking about a new instrument, for the next generation. There was a beautiful Aeolian Skinner here that was built in the late 30s before this organ, and it served very, faithfully. And every organ has its strengths and weaknesses, and then this instrument was put in. So I think looking towards the future and always be thinking about that natural lifespan. But I enjoy playing it. So, Phil. Yeah, I've heard this a lot, and sort of talking to people in the congregation. Reality is reality, and not everyone can commit to the weekly rehearsal and performance. So we're going to explore, maybe picking a Sunday or two in the spring that will be a y'all come kind of thing, but backing up a month of rehearsals. Maybe we spend the first 30 minutes of the rehearsal on that repertoire so people can come, for 30 minutes and just try it out. Again, like the yield from VBS, I think it's super important to do because you get people, if you get 10 people who take us up on that and 2 decide to join the choir, that's a great yield. And it doesn't cost us anything to do it, right? So it's just thinking, you have to think strategically about when's the best time of the year to do it and how to communicate that and, what kind of repertoire but I'm all for it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, you heard it this morning. Yeah, the last verse of When Morning Gilds the Skies, I played a few of what I call my dirty chords. And I learned this from Paul Halley, who was another mentor, who was an amazing concert organist, but also amazing jazz musician. And you can just throw some harmonies in sometimes that, just ease it a little bit further down that spectrum. So when I say jazz or anything, I'm always looking at the synthesis of how it all comes together. But there's a jazz mass that I'm looking at doing on the Sunday before Lent starts. All kinds of fun things, we can do. I know the bluegrass mass was really a lot of fun, and I just happen to have some friends who do a bluegrass band. So there you go. Hmm. Hmm. Well, organ music isn't for everybody. I actually hate going to organ recitals. It's the last thing I want to do is hear organ music in my spare time. But 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 for people who do enjoy that, absolutely, I would love that. And educating people. I love to have children come up to the console during the postlude and watch. And we might just hook, the next organist that way. So. Well, I would love to talk to you some more individually and separately about this stuff, and I'm excited about what we're going to be able to do here. So thank you for coming today, and thank you for your support.